Geoengineering, or weather manipulation or weather modification, has been around for a very, very long time. A lot of people hear it and they think, oh, that's a conspiracy theory, but it's been around for a very, very long time. Earliest like encounters with it being the Native Americans doing rain dances, right? Rain dances, if you have enough numbers, believe it or not, rain dances actually work. You get a big group of people together, you start dancing in the desert, you kick up dust, it attaches to water in the atmosphere, it collects together, it forms droplets, and it falls down to the ground. Whenever I was getting this video ready and I was preparing for it, I was kind of thinking, like, what's the best way to present this material, especially to somebody who may or may not have even heard of any of this stuff before, right? So we're going to use the trivium, the grammar, logic, and rhetoric to break this down. And then, I'm sorry about that, I'm grabbing my colors right now, my chalk colors right here. We're going to break down the grammar, logic, and rhetoric of this and determine, so first thing we're going to do is who is doing this. Then we're going to get into the what are they doing. And then we're going to get into the when. And then we're going to get into the where. And then we're going to get into the how. And the very, very important why. Now, before we get into these two, right, we have to first answer these four: the who, what, when, where. We have to understand the who, what, when, where before we can get into the how or why, right? And this provides a very sound basis of understanding, right? This is the trivium. This is the grammar, logic, and rhetoric. This is also your BS tester, right? Your lie detector, right? So let's start off with the who. Now, before we get into the who, remember Caleb House has a donor right now that's willing to match up to any donations up to $500,000. So if you feel strongly about saving kids from trafficking, go over to Caleb House, donate. There's going to be a donor matching up to $500,000. I'm getting my Morpheus blue light blockers on right now because we're talking about conspiracies. Also, if you need an on-site consultation where I come out to your property and I give you an on-site, consultation for what to do, where to do it, and what to do on your property, then hit up the email down below. Same thing with soil biology tests. Also, for those of you that are taking the online permaculture design course, this scene right here is very, very familiar with you because this is the room that I use to teach my online permaculture design course over on Patreon. If you want to learn everything I know about permaculture, hit up that Patreon account down below. That being said, let's get back into the who aspect. All right, so since this is such a long list, I will be reading it directly from the computer, but the who aspect of it is actually pretty doggone easy because who funds the grants? The funder of the grant usually has to sign who the funder is and whatnot. Same thing with a lot of these organizations. They write up reports, they give like Senate hearings, they do all these types of things that show us like who is doing this. We might not see who behind the scenes is doing it, but we know what organizations are doing it, what groups are doing it, what universities are doing it, what militaries are doing it, things like that. Weather derivatives, the CME Group, AccuWeather, Artemis, AWS Energy Services, ICAP, Guaranteed Weather, Galileo Weather. That's just a short list among the list. Weather Modification Association. So this is the full corporate roster is on here, right? So Advanced Radar Corps, Aero Systems, Aerotech Argentina, Colorado Water Conservation Board, Deepwater Chemicals. It goes all the way down to Wyoming Water Development. And then Texas, the state that I live in, has its own group of weather modification associates. They have the West Texas Weather Modification, Southwest Texas Rain Enhancement Association, South Texas Weather Modification Association, Panhandle GCD Precipitation Enhancement Program, Southern Ogallala Aquifer Rain Program, which is called SOAR. And it goes on even into the military groups and then other groups, which is Aqueous, Drake International, Meteo Systems, Australian Rain Technologies, Ionogenics, Evergreen Aviation, Kansas Water Office. Like, look, all right, the who part, for convincing you that weather modification part, the who part, we can stop and end there, right? Now, we don't understand the methods necessarily at this point. We don't understand the why. We don't understand. But right here, at this point, we can confirm that weather engineering is a legit thing. that we're encountering on a day-to-day basis. Like if this wasn't, like, you don't have communities talking about unicorns. You know why? Because unicorns don't exist, or at least to the best of our knowledge, they don't or didn't. I don't even know anymore. But you don't have all these organizations, all these groups, all this money funneling through technology that doesn't exist, right? Now we're into the what aspect. And I hope that was white. Kind of hard to tell with my red glasses. Yep, now we're into the what aspect. So what is it specifically that they're doing? Now, there's a few things that we can look at. And keep in mind, guys, go to geoengineeringwatch.org if you want like full detailed information on all of this stuff. It seems like in a lot of these organizations and a lot of these patents, it started off by either increasing rain or decreasing rain, or increasing or decreasing hail events, decreasing hurricanes, things like that. They were trying to buffer the extremes of our climate. So extreme droughts, extreme rain events, things like that. That's what it seemed like they were doing at the beginning. For example, the earliest patent that I could find was in 1891, and it's talking about the method of producing rainfall, which the way he describes it, pretty straightforward. You have a balloon or some sort of rocket or whatever it is that throws a canister up into the upper atmosphere. In that canister, you have dry ice, and then it blows up, and then it spreads the dry ice everywhere. It cools the atmosphere, forms raindrops, and then it starts raining. That's one of the simplest methods that I saw within the patents of creating, rain. And I think that's where it started off at first. I think they had good intentions at first when it came to controlling the weather, like ensuring good crops, ensuring, on the other hand, ensuring good crops both from drought and from flooding. But then, once you start receiving power, you don't hit a point where you're like, oh, this is enough power, I'm good now. People start trying to control all aspects of the climate now. Now, one thing that is I gotta tiptoe around, because YouTube is going to try to censor this video because of this statement, or because of what I'm trying to communicate here. But there's a push right now that there are too many people on the earth. That is false. We can fit everybody, especially with permaculture, we can fit everybody in the world in North America, and everybody be completely comfortable and fed if designed properly, right? So we're nowhere near the max limitation on what the Earth's capacity for humans. And anybody who pushes that, typically, I won't get into that. But anyway, there's a group out there, a group of elites that are wanting full control over everything. They're trying to limit or lower the human population, right? So depopulation events. And then also they're trying to, it looks like they're trying to destroy everything, really. I mean, if you throw the climate out of whack, there's, reoccurring, and we'll get into more of that, but there's like reoccurring issues just from adjusting one weather event, right? It's a butterfly effect. So why they're doing it now, what they're claiming what they're doing right now, or what they're doing right now is spraying these radio sensitive particles into the air, and then they control these particles with the HARP is an outdated version of it, but these NextRad radio towers where they used to, and then whenever there's a storm, it has all these charged particles in the air, and I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but there's these charged particles in the air. They can use these radar towers to steer these storms, to stop these storms, control these storms, and steer them. Because whenever, let's say I have a storm over here, it has a bunch of charged particles, I turn this tower on, it shoots up all these ELF waves up into the atmosphere and stops the storm from coming this direction, right? So if I can stop it from coming this direction, if I do that a few more times, it only has a couple other options, or it stands still, which is what we saw in Hurricane Helene. We saw the Helene stand still over western North Carolina. But what are they doing? They're trying to control the weather to some extent. At first, it was just like localized storms, making it either rain more or rain less or whatever it may be. And now they're getting into the full dimming of the sun, where they're trying to block out as much of the sun as possible, decrease population, and have full control over climate, weather. Have you noticed these natural disasters are increasing? It's not the reasoning they're telling you. It's not the global warming or the climate change that they're saying it is. It's the results of what they're doing up in the upper atmosphere. If we're going to claim, climate control or weather manipulation, or I mean, not weather manipulation, but global warming or anything like that, we first have to eliminate this variable right? If we're going to claim any of those things, if we're going to say anything else has an effect, then we got to stop affecting it directly ourselves. Now we're going to get into the when. So when do they do this? Now there's a couple of different whens we can analyze here. They do this on like an hour-to-hour basis, 30-minute to 30-minute basis. Basically, anytime a plane is flying overhead and you see a trail that stays behind the plane and then just slowly dissipates and turns into one big cloud, anytime you don't see that contrail dissipating immediately after leaving the jet, that's when they're doing it. They're doing it all the time. And in fact, in some states like Tennessee, they've outlawed it at certain altitudes, which Tennessee coincidentally outlawed it at an altitude that nobody sprays at anyway, so it didn't really do much. It looked good, but it didn't really, serve much of a function. They're doing it all the time, and I would say they started patenting weather modification back in 1891. Now, the latest patent that I can pull up, May 2023, and it is coated chloride salt particles and methods of making and using the same. So just in 2023, we had some more patents come in. Now, as far as the when part goes, I feel like this is probably the best time to bring this up. I've noticed something interesting when it came to the patents, right? So we had our first patent in, 1897, right? That's where 1891, sorry, method of producing rainfall. Then we have 1905, means for producing high potential electrical charges. And then we have, sporadically we might have 10 to 15 before 1945, and then 1950 hits and this stuff blows up. Once we got those Nazi scientists, we started doing weather modification like crazy. From the 50s, especially in the 60s, and even more in the 70s, all these patents just start flooding into the US Patent Office for different methods of geoengineering. Again, you can go to geoengineeringwatch.org and look at all of these weather modification patents. Now, I think we skipped around a little bit. Okay, so the when. They're doing it all the freaking time. Just look up. You notice that you no longer have any clear blue skies anymore. They're always slightly hazy at best. Now we're into the where aspect, right? So definitely 100% in the United States and in Canada, right? That's where we're noticing the effects. Also, over in Europe, we're noticing it there, some parts of Asia, but where we're not seeing it is below Mexico City. So Mexico has made it illegal, can't do it there. So have a lot of other South American countries. Now, Africa as well is on the list of countries that do not want this stuff going on. Now, depending on the country, will determine whether or not it's successful in their protests. But there have been some national bans, such as like Mexico. But there's also calls for bans in Africa, Fiji, Colombia, and some in the European Parliament. And it says like they're advocating for a formal non-use declaration or restrict to geoengineering. So restrictions on geoengineering. So like, y'all, all of this language that we're seeing, you can no longer, if you're this far into the video, you can no longer deny that geoengineering is a thing, right? There's countries that are saying, hey, let's stop this. Let's hold off for a second. Let's see what this actually causes before we continue. So that suggests that there are countries that are doing it willy-nilly, just as they wish, right? So that takes care of the where. So, and then also I have a list of countries. So let's go through this list of countries of where experiments have, occurred, and for different various reasons, but yeah, let's just go through this list of countries where geoengineering, the title of this document is A Half Century of Earth Systems Experimentation. So we have Algeria, Antigua, Argentina, Armenia, Australia, bunch of Australia, ton of Australia, Azerbaijan, Belize, Brazil, Burkina Faso, didn't know that was a country, Cambodia, Cameroon, Canada. We're just in the seas, y'all. A bunch in Canada, Chile, China, Costa Rica, Cote d'Ivoire, maybe? Cote d'Ivoire? I don't know. Cuba, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Egypt, Eritrea, which is like Africa's North Korea, European Union, another European Union, tons and tons of country. And these are all countries that have had experiments going on to whatever extent. And this was just for this particular research group, right? We have Ghana, we have Guatemala, Guyana, Hawaii, India, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, Israel, Jamaica, Japan, Kenya. I mean, basically all the countries. All the countries have had some experimentation by this one particular group at some point in time. Like, they're hitting up countries I hadn't even heard of before. So where? Everywhere. That's where they're doing it. Now we're going to get into the how. How are they doing this? So now they have like spray apparatuses, right? That are spraying as the jet goes on. Now they were claiming, I think RFK claimed that, a lot of this weather modification and what we're seeing left over in the sky is due to jet exhaust and whatnot. That's not even the case. Like, a lot of these compounds would melt in a jet engine, right? That was a bunch of garbage. We know it's not through the jet engine exhaust, right? Aluminum would melt in those temperatures. But they have these spray apparatuses underneath planes, and you pilots or you you aircraft mechanics and stuff like that, tell me if I'm lying. Tell me if I'm lying. There aren't these spray apparatuses underneath planes that will spray out this fluid as they're flying once they hit the appropriate altitudes. That's why you don't see contrails leaving the airport. You wait till they get to these certain altitude and then they start spraying. That's when you start having these issues. So they got the cloud. It's inoculated with all the radio reactive particles. They boost the radio waves, and then it steers the storm, like I kind of described earlier, right? They're able to control these weather events. They're able to steer. They're able to combine. They're able to store and stall and do whatever they want to with these rain events, just by inoculating them with those particles and then controlling them with radio towers on the ground. What's the next rad radar system? That's a huge one. That's especially through the southeast, that's a huge one that they're using to steer storms. So that's the basic how they're doing this. Now we're into the why, which is probably the one that's most difficult to answer. Why do evil people do evil things? I don't entirely know why. Because this is like, what we're doing is mutual destruction right now. But one of the reasons why they want to do that is to lower the population. Also, they want to make you infertile so that you can't reproduce. There are, fertility effects from what they're spraying into the sky. Turns the freaking frogs gay, like Alex Jones. But the other why is that they want to make you completely dependent on them for everything that you need. So if they make it in an environment where food can only be grown in certain conditions inside of a lab or inside of a building or something like that, they have full control over that. And we can't grow our own food because of the outdoor conditions, or growing our own food is super unstable because of the outdoor conditions. That's one of the big whys that I can see, is that they want to kill us all, and then they want to also limit the population with that, but they also want to make us completely dependent on them, because once we're completely dependent on them, then we can no longer protest, we can no longer revolt, we can no longer do what it is we want, because they have everything that we need. That's why, like Jeff Lawton's statement, like, the most revolutionary act you can possibly do is to have a garden, is to grow as much of your own food as possible, because that makes you less reliant upon the system that you're trying to fight against. So there we go. This was just a quick little breakdown of the who, what, where, when, or when, where, how, and why of geoengineering. I thought this was probably the best way to, bring it up to people who are unfamiliar with the topic or have heard very, very little about the topic before. But just go to geoengineeringwatch.org. They have more than enough information that you need to go in and, discover that, like, oh, geoengineering isn't like a conspiracy theory. This is just a conspiracy. Like, it's not a theory. None of this language suggests that this is something that we might do in the future. All of this language suggests that this is something that we're doing now and we're trying to improve and get better at. So thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to leave down below any weather modification events that you guys are aware of. There's a whole litany of them. So feel free, leave them down below. Leave it for the other viewers to go through the comments and kind of see some other events that they can go and research themselves. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, we'll see you.